What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the NASCAR Run Pure Sports Show. I don't even know if that's what we call it. I don't watch too much NASCAR, but I am here to hang out with Dunkel. I heard he was going solo by himself on a NASCAR show, and I said, that's not allowed. I can't let Dunkel go out here and talk trucks, even though it's not trucks, but I love to call it the trucks. Can't have him talk them alone, so we're here breaking it down. Dunkel, I'll go over to you. How was your day, and how pumped are you for the NASCAR today?
Yeah, so pretty pumped. I didn't even participate in the race last week. It obviously got rained out. We didn't have a show because we kind of knew it would get rained out. Seemed like a decent race, a little chalky, I guess, in the way it played out. But so a nice little week off, back in the streets for me this week. Yeah, very prepared to talk on various different things this week. We're back to a speedway, a 1.5 mile track with a few extra dominated points to go around. So yeah, look, excited to talk through it. And as we often do on the show, man, we basically just run through Coop's playbook. In terms of talk dominators, core play, value plays, positional difference drivers, blah, 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 blah. But no, looking forward to talking on all this and, hopefully giving people some winners.
Yeah, that's a good segue because you this is what you called out. You said on the last segment, you said, I haven't played NASCAR because it got rained out. Well, Dunkel, guess who did play NASCAR? Because I found out it was on a Monday. I said, I can get into NASCAR streets. And I cashed of my 5 entries, I cashed them. But the best part about it was I was sitting there just like a member would, right? I mean, I'm at the gym. I'm getting a good lift in, right? And I look down at my phone and I see someone like in a Discord chat, talking about NASCAR. And like they're posting lineups. And I'm like, isn't this in like 2.5 hours? And I still suck with the time zone being in Colorado. And I find out I have 30 minutes to build 5 NASCAR lineups. So what do? You know what? I pound some bench presses in, and then in between I built some NASCAR lineups, reading Jason's free article, right? Looking at the playbook. So cashed all 5 using the Run Pure Sports content. So great reason to go sign up. Go use runpuresports.com. You can use the code MANGO15. That'll get you 15% off your first payment. But I am not the NASCAR expert. I'm just going to here to guide the show. If you guys have questions, ask them in the chat. I will probably ask some really stupid questions as well. But hey, sometimes that's good. It gives you kind of the more beginner perspective, which sometimes that kind of makes it easier for you. So, Dunkel, let's dive in. Like you said, we're going to go through the playbook. I think that's a great way to do it. Typically, I like to always kick it off with how many dominators is this race, right? That's at least for me, right? Because I think that's one of the biggest lineup building points. One thing that I think a lot of people do in NASCAR DFS is they just go in and they just can put the projections in or just, put drivers in by hand, and they don't even think about rules, right? They're not even just like thinking of it, and they might make like a 2v2 or a 3v3. And that's why when I build with an optimizer, I make sure to put these rules in. Dominators. Let's start there with these guys at the top, because I believe that's how Coop has it in the playbook. He's got, who's he got? Ross Chastain up top, Denny Hamlin, Truex, Larson, Byron, and Tyler Reddick. Those are some of the guys that he is keying in on the start spots. Byron is on the pole, number 1. He'll start there. What's your thoughts here on this top-end dominator range, Dunkel?
Yeah, so kind of I'll just touch on what you mentioned with the, kind of building your lineups properly. I feel very confident that especially in the $15, like 10 to 15% of lineups are just dead on arrival because they don't have enough of everything, right? I think that sometimes if you hand build or if you're using an optimizer improperly, you're going to get a lineup with like 6 place differential guys, or maybe 5 guys, or maybe 6 guys in the middle, or maybe 3 dominators on a track like this. Like those lineups are just dead on arrival. Like there won't be a scenario where those lineups hit unless and look, there's chaos every week in NASCAR, but just like absolute total chaos. And people still build their lineups in that fashion. And it's just, again, your lineups are dead on arrival in that sense. In relation to dominators on this track, right? So history has shown Toyota's fuck here. And when you look at the Toyotas, right, who is that, right? It's Christopher Bell, it's Ty Gibbs, it's Denny Hamlin, it's Marty Truex, it's Tyler Reddick, it's Bubba Wallace. The only concern with the Toyotas is they're so expensive here. They all are. But when you talk about, how they did in qualifying, 6 of the top 17 cars in qualifying were all Toyotas. And I think 5 of the top 12 were all Toyotas, including Chris Bell. So, yeah, this is typically a track where Toyotas show speed, right? But I feel like DraftKings did a really good job with pricing them because if you look up and down, your Toyotas are expensive. Hamlin's 10.7, Bell's 10.2, Reddick's 10.4, Truex is 10. Even Bubba Wallace. I mean, look, I took on Bubba Wallace every week. I feel like I play this dude every week and I'm over-owned on him every week. He's 9K and he's anticipated to be one of the higher owned drivers on the slate. And then you go down to Ty Gibbs at 78, who you could argue where he's starting from, he's overpriced. But regardless, you do need this manufacturer in your lineups. I have a rule that I'm basically saying no more and no less than 2 Toyotas in every lineup. I do feel pretty good that 2 Toyotas come in the top 10 here. Now, will they be in the optimal? Time will tell. But the way I've built my rules, or one of the rules I have, is definitely no more, no less than 2 Toyotas. The reason why I want no more than 2 Toyotas is because of price. Again, look at these guys and how they're priced. If you have 3 Toyotas in your lineup, good luck with the rest of it. Like, the rest of it's just going to be nonsense. And keep in mind, this is a track where the cream rises to the top here. You just don't typically see your bottom, drivers win this race. This is typically a top-heavy race in terms of who normally wins it. And if you're building a lineup where you have 3 of these Toyotas, you're going to need a few scrubs in your lineup. And it's just, the lineup's just not going to make sense based on the history of what happens at this track. Now, you mentioned some non-Toyota drivers, right? William Byron. To me, he's a fade for me. You got to pick your spots. The Toyotas are expensive. William Byron with offering no place differential, coming off a huge race last week. And here's the good thing with Byron, right? Byron has led a ton of laps at certain tracks this year where he kind of just places himself into the optimal because of how many laps led. I think he has 3 races this year where he's led over 100 laps. This track is just different. It's easy to pass here. It's hard to imagine. I want to be clear. When I say easy to pass, it's easier to pass here than most tracks. The idea that William Byron is going to lead a ton of laps here is just hard to imagine, especially with how much speed you're going to get out of these Toyota drivers. So for me, fading William Byron, he could get there for you. Great. I just think if he gets there, you're going to need him to get like 30 or 35 Dominator points. And that's just so rare for this track. And of course, he'd have to finish in the top 3. Not as big a fan there. I could be convinced into Larson just because these are tracks where, I mean, look, he does well at every track, but these are tracks where he's performed pretty well as well. His price is the highest of all the drivers. His win equity is not what I would consider your typical Larson win equity for this price. And again, he's not going to offer you any place differential. So I'm definitely going to be underweight on him. I know he's only going to be about, sub 10 to 15% owned anyway, but consider me underweight. And Chastain's the big enigma, right? Chastain's been a guy that I've played sparingly throughout this year. Definitely going to have ownership on him today. I liked what we saw out of him last week. And look, we know with Chastain what you get, right? You get that recklessness. You get a guy that's really going to push forward and aim to push past drivers. And again, this track, you can certainly pass people, especially if you're aggressive. So the Chastain call makes sense to me.
Well, Douglas, will he be very high owned? Because what I noticed, and this is just like quick rule of thumb, like looking at the playbook, I see all the prices on the guys, but who's the cheapest of them all? And he's starting 3rd, which that obviously feels more encouraging than grabbing a guy in 8th to grab those early points. But I feel like Chastain could be chalky at 9.6 just because he's the cheapest of the potential dominators. Does that make sense to you?
It could, right? I'd expect Chastain to be anywhere between 15 to 20% owned today, which I would consider for a NASCAR race, that to be around the median, right? Like, I don't consider that chalky personally.
Yeah, he's not the Kyle Larson 50% last week like we saw at Dover. I mean, Kyle Larson was just mega.
Yeah, I mean, look, Chastain could, he could see ownership. You're right on the price. Like, he could see more than that. To me, it's a track where people are going to try to squeeze in Toyotas for obvious reasons. And then once you do that, you just kind of lose the ability to pay up for more guys. But yeah, this is the type of track where Chastain makes sense. But I know a lot of people also look for win equity. He's 9-1. He's like the 6th or 7th odds-on driver to win the race. Doesn't offer a lot of place differential. So to me, the 15 to 20% is probably accurate. But I do think he's a good pivot. I do think he makes sense. I'm definitely going to have him in my pool. And so he definitely makes sense for me. And he's been a guy that as long as he's hanging around late, he's going to push hard to win this race for you. So yeah, I don't mind them. And I've already mentioned the Toyota drivers, which kind of round out the rest of Coop's playbook. So yeah, it's kind of where I stand with dominators. I also think you should not have more than 2 dominators, two drivers inside the top 10 in your lineups. Again, it's a race where you're probably going to see some sparingness in terms of guys at the top that dominate a handful of laps, and you're going to see place differential guys as well. So I don't think you should have more than 2 dominators, especially with how all these guys are priced. And Hamlin, an odds-on favorite to win the race. Look, Hamlin's all year, he's shown good long-run speed, and the thing that pokes out about yesterday is he had good top speed, And again, he is a Toyota. So the Hamlin spot makes sense, but keep in mind, like there's a lot of drivers that make sense. And if you're playing Hamlin, that means you're only getting one of those other, call it drivers that are priced inside the top 10 or 12. So yeah, you're playing Hamlin. He's definitely up there. And I already said, I'm going to fade Byron. I'm going to be lower owned on Larson. Hamlin's, I'm probably going to be on the lower side of the Toyotas with Hamlin. I'm definitely going to have ownership of him though. But it just makes his line, you makes your lineup tough. If you're picking Hamlin, you basically need to do to T2, T3 with dominator points. And he can just realize what it does to the rest of your lineup. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, definitely 2 Toyotas for me across the board.
Cool. A couple of things that you mentioned there as I was listening, things I wanted to mention to the people. For one, if you're wondering who the drivers are, right, for Toyota, obviously I know you said it before, but we have a team drivers page, right? Or as some of the kids say, Joe Gibbs Racing, right? You can call it that. That's Team Toyota. Team Toyota is as follows: Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex, Chris Bell, Ty Gibbs, and I think you also got the I don't know. Are these the same?
Yeah, it's Bubba Wallace and Tyler Reddick.
Bubba Wallace and Tyler Reddick. They're part of Racing Toyota, whatever that's called. So those are the Toyota guys. If you're looking for that, I know Dunkel is stressing playing some Toyota drivers today. That makes sense. Another question, Dunkel. I know you and I, we do the golf bet show. We always get a course preview. Can I get a Snyder type track preview here? Like how many laps is it? Obviously, you want 2 potential dominators. I'm assuming it's because of certain amount of laps that you want led from drivers. Can I get a course preview from Dunkel here?
Yes, you got 267 laps. So dominator points, there's a handful of them to go around. It's not like your typical like top heavy dominator track though. We see tracks with 400 and such laps. So it's not that type of track, but it is a 1.5 mile speedway. So, you're definitely going to get your dominator points. Tire wear, big piece here. So if you worry about pit crews and their ability to manage tires well, it's been a big problem with Byron, right? The ability to make adjustments throughout races. Part of the reason why I'm off him. Larson, it feels like his team typically does a really good job, but man, it almost like it seems to come in bunches with Larson. When he starts out poorly and he goes too aggressive to try to make up for it, that's where things start to go south for him. But yes, big tire wear here. Now, granted, it's not like a crazy tire wear track, but you have to properly manage tires. And look, the track conditions here, as our guy Jason mentioned in his article, are going to change as the track goes around, right? It's going to be relatively warm today as well. So overall, just a lot of things to consider in relation to pit crew, and that makes guys like Ryan Blaney tough to play today because of pit crew. But yes, you're looking at a track where 260 plus laps of dominator points to go, 1.5 mile in nature, and tire wear and pit crew's ability or driver's ability to properly manage their vehicle throughout the entire race. And obviously these things are usually big in a race, but definitely more magnified in relation to this one. So looking forward to talking more through it.
Yep. And again, I think one key thing, Douglas saying 2 dominators, right? Like, I think that's one thing that if I had to pick one rule to set, that's kind of the stuff that I'd be looking at and making sure to do. I saw one of the guys in chat said that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dunkel, I think they said who are the 2 high? Denny and Bell. They're the 2 favorites. They should be higher on than Chastain. One idea that I like to do sometimes, Dunkel, it could be wrong, I don't know, but it's a quick DFS rule of thumb. For instance, you could use this in NBA today. If you thought Jimmy Butler and Devin Booker were both 50% plus owned, they're not. But if they were, the 2 highest owned guys in the slate, just separate them from each other, and you can get some unique teams from the field in that way, and kind of go even with the field with the way you build your teams, because your teams are just unique, right? It's like that in golf. It's like that in almost any DFS sport. You can kind of get away with stuff like that. Do you think separating Denny and Bell is an interesting idea? Because if those are the 2 highest owned guys, then wouldn't that be the case that they're going to be the 2 most optimal dominators on people's teams?
So that's a little bit of a tricky question. So I will say this: I'm not going to have a single lineup that has both of them. I also don't think that's going to make me crazy different either, because it's with the way pricing is at this track, and because it's often so top heavy, it's not easy to fit those 2 in the same lineup and like your lineup. Because if you're playing those 2, you're going to need at least a 5K guy, like a sub 5K guy. And don't get me wrong, there's guys you could play. We'll talk on some value. But man, you play those 2 together, it could get there, but you're going to need attrition because you're going to need guys from the back to land in your optimal. And it's just tough sledding. It's tough sledding. So to answer your question, I'm not going to have a single lineup. I do have a rule that's going to block those 2 from one another. And look, they can get there. I just think there's a better shot that one of them performs much better than the other, and it leaves the other out of the optimal.
No, that's fine. Like I said, these are little things that I look for when kind of going through it, and that's why I'm trying to talk it through. You're getting the basically DFS perspective, not the hand in the dirt or I don't know, hand in the oil takes. I don't know how you'd call it for NASCAR, but hands on the wheel takes. You're not getting those, right? I'm not to go out here and tell you this driver, that driver, but definitely going to ask some NASCAR type questions for the people. Let's keep this thing moving along. Let's go over to the next range that we're going to discuss here. We got the place differential guys, right? Place differential is important in NASCAR. It's good to take guys in the back, especially when there's guys getting in accidents, because then it becomes free points. If I'm in dead last and 5 dudes get in an accident and I'm still racing the race, well, I've gotten +5 on them, right? I'm moving ahead in the field. So place differential definitely matters a lot. Some of these guys, Josh Berry, I do not know much about Josh Berry. I think I played him last week, but Josh Berry must be one of the newer guys. Ricky Stenhouse, or as I like to call him, Recky Stenhouse. Keselowski, that's a really interesting one there where he's starts 20th, but he's kind of in that interesting spot where he's not way in the back, but he's a very good driver and feels underpriced to 8,200 for someone like Keselowski. I know he's a bit older. Maybe you'll have some takes for me on that. And then what's it called? Ryan Preece. That's another guy we got in the playbook here, starting in 28th. Pretty decent driver. How do you want to handle this range with the guys in the back, right? Because again, place differential is important. Do you set rules for place differential guys, or just kind of let the chips fall how they may?
Yeah, so I'll touch on the guys you mentioned, right? So Josh Berry. Josh Berry is arguably going to be the highest owned driver on the slate. I do not consider him great chalk today. Now I consider him good chalk. I don't consider him great chalk. And the reason for that is because he's still kind of getting used to playing in the big leagues. This is don't get me wrong. He's been a great driver throughout his career, his short career for that matter. And obviously he was driving Chase Elliott's car for a bit. But, this is a track where you're going to have to pass and you're going to have to feel confident in passing. And it just, to me, he's going to be 40% owned today. I don't know. I'd rather play other guys at that type of ownership. I want to be clear. I'm not fading Josh Berry today. There are drivers where I will take a suicidal stand on or a kamikaze stand in a negative way. That's not going to be me with Berry today, but I am going to be at least half of that ownership. And it's not to say I'm going to be rooting against him, but I definitely, if Josh Berry absolutely nukes this slate, it's not going to be good for our friend Dunkel. But yes, I will have some Berry. I just feel like there's better guys to pivot. Like I like Keselowski a lot more. So like Keselowski at half the ownership, I do like him a lot more. I feel like his upside's better. He obviously loves this type of track. Now, when I say upside's better, he obviously doesn't have as much place differential, but I don't worry about Keselowski navigating up and down this track as much as I do with Berry. Now, Berry obviously has upside. I get that, and I will have him. But I also, between the two, I prefer Ricky Stenhouse. Like I consider Ricky Stenhouse great chalk today. He's cheaper priced. He's coming from further back. And I don't have any concerns about Ricky Stenhouse on 1.5-mile tracks. Now, as long as Stenhouse can keep his car upright, you mentioned the Recky Stenhouse. As long as he can keep his car upright, I'm fine with it. Again, I worry about Berry's inexperience at this level. I know that, I use the term young. Maybe you could use the term inexperienced. But for me, at this level, he hasn't even shown major. I think he raced well on the Monday race. I didn't follow it all that much though.
He wasn't terrible, but
yeah. So he raced well, and then the Toyota Owners 400. Like to me, that was just like a step in shit moment for Berry. Like I don't know if anybody watched that race, but like Josh Berry waited forever to pit, and there was an accident at the perfect time for him, so he was able to pit under caution. Like if that accident at that time doesn't happen, like he's going to end outside the top 25. I don't know. Like you look at his best races and he's just kind of stepped in shit on his good races. Obviously I didn't catch last week, but he raced well last week. I don't know. 40% ownership. I get it. You got to take stands though. You might have a rocket ship as Phila mentions, but yeah, for me at the price I get, he doesn't need to do much for you. I think a top 15 or top 20 finish could land him in the optimal. I'll just take my stand on going halfway there. And then who was the other driver you mentioned from the playbook that I haven't touched? Oh, Ryan Preece. Ryan Preece is an easy fade for me. When you talk on win equity and win share, he has similar win equity and win share to drivers much cheaper than him. So I'd rather play Stenhouse. I'd rather play Berry. Priest is just a guy that falls out of line for me. And granted, he shouldn't. Well, I say he shouldn't. I guess he could see ownership, but I don't expect him to see a crazy amount of ownership today anyway. But yeah, Priest is a fade for me.
All right, Priest looks like a fade for you. Obviously, there's a lot of different ways that we can go with NASCAR, a lot of different routes that you can take. Hey, Priest could be a good play. It can also be a fade for you, right? Depends on ownership. I think that's really important. When I kind of build out lineups, I definitely always like to look at the ownership to try and figure those things out. Let's talk about some of these middle tier drivers here. Bubba Wallace, Chris Bell, and Kyle Busch. They're kind of in that conversation. These are guys that I guess you could say not they're lost in the shuffle, but like they're just not. They have a pretty decent price tag, but they're also not placement differential options, right? Or they're not placement differential options, and they're also not as much the guys for potential dominators. Could they dominate the race? Sure, they could move up. I mean, I know I haven't played NASCAR. I mean, I played a little bit, but I know Kyle Busch has had his struggles. But can Kyle Busch go from 16th to 1st? Of course he could. He's a talented driver, right? I know he's had his struggles last year, but he could still get up there. Some of these guys could be dominators, but their ability to be a dominator at this track is going to be a little bit more difficult. So these are kind of guys, I think, when you build out your lineup, Sunkel, they're last pieces in, but they're also very low-owned pieces, right, compared to other options, because no one's going to want to play them because it just doesn't seem like they're not in the placement differential category, and they're not going to be in the dominator category. So they kind of just get lost in the shuffle there. Do you have any interest in these drivers? Are they appealing to you? Because it seems like there's almost every single week, I would probably argue, there's got to be one of these guys that sneaks their way into the optimal or finds their way into contention.
Yeah, so just quick shout out to my guy Yeezy. I know I missed a few comments from you, but always love Yeezy. And I know you mentioned you like Ty Gibbs. It's hard not to like Ty Gibbs. The reason you probably might not love Ty Gibbs is just because of where he's starting from. Doesn't offer you a ton of place differential, and he's also a bit overpriced for where he's starting from. But that kind of goes right in line with all the Toyotas. And speaking of Toyotas, right? So you mentioned two more Toyotas, Bubba Wallace and Chris Bell. So Bubba Wallace is going to be chalky today. And I'm overweight on Bubba Wallace every week. This week I will be slightly underweight just because of where his ownership numbers are at. I also mention this all the time too. Like there are in this sport, and you do this with every kind of sport in your own way. There are certain drivers when they get to a certain price, you just really don't want to play them anymore. Bubba Wallace at 9K is not exactly a fun ride. No pun intended. But like, if you look at it, the last time he was 9K was in February. And it was a super speedway in Daytona. This is not a super speedway. I mean, this is a speedway. But I don't mind paying up for Bubba Wallace when he's at a super speedway, especially like Daytona. But in this spot at 9K, I have to play him because he's a Toyota. He's going to show speed here, but he did have the lowest lap times yesterday for all the Toyotas. And the problem with Bubba Wallace is he's a really good driver that just consistently makes mistakes that cost him the race. And maybe some people will say that, well, that's why he's not a really good driver. But if you watch him race, like the dude consistently pushes that car forward. Like he is just constantly moving north in every race he's in, passing with ease. But it's always something with him and his car. And even the race where he cost me a lot of money 2 weeks ago, he was in second place at a restart late in the race. And he once again got crashed, and it just blew up my entire day. It just seems to always happen, one thing or another, whether it's his pit, a random tire, him being too aggressive. In that race 2 weeks ago, he was way too aggressive. Trying to triple block whoever that was. Maybe that was Joey Logano. I forgot who it was. But triple blocked him, which was just a no-no in NASCAR. It's these flubs that he makes that just make him so difficult to want to race or play week in and week out. But I continue to do so because he's typically lower owned. Today, he's not going to be lower owned. 30%, decent win equity, sure. I definitely prefer Chris Bell. Chris Bell is going to be one of the higher owned drivers I have for today. Great history here. A Toyota, great speed, has place differential and lap lead equity today. I really like the spot for Bell. He's going to be, somewhat chalky, I guess, for a dominator, right? I mean, I'm looking at his ownership. Yeah, so 34-ish%. But again, I consider that really good chalk today, especially at the top. So going to have Bell for sure. And then you mentioned Kyle Busch. So Kyle Busch is definitely in my pool as well. A little higher owned than I'd like him to be in this spot. But again, when we talk on prices, right, 9,400 is a good price for Kyle Busch. It's not like the Bubba Wallace situation where you kind of feel like you're overpaying for Bubba Wallace. Like Kyle Busch is usually a lot more expensive than 9,400. To put it into perspective, he's been priced under 9,400 just twice all season. So yeah, not his typical track per se, but he has the upside. He can be strong on 1.5 mile tracks. So, and he did look solid in practice too. So for me, yeah, I'm going to be higher owned than Busch of Busch over Wallace specifically, but definitely going to have all three guys in my lineups that you mentioned.
Yeah, definitely lots of guys here that you can like. Wanted to mention one thing. You got to hit the like in the chat, please. That helps us out a ton over here at Run Pure Sports. I jumped on a NASCAR show. You don't get me on a NASCAR show too often. So some could say this is a treat. Also, some could say that I was just ignoring watering the lawn because we have to get the little maintenance on the yard, and I didn't feel like doing it. I got out of the car, had my nice little coffee drink, and I said, Douglas doing a NASCAR show by himself. That can't happen. That's not a good idea. So let's keep this thing moving along, though. Let's go over and talk about the next range. This is, as Coop likes to have on the playbook, the value town drivers, right? Drivers who are most cheap and were able to fit in this range. And there's a lot of guys to talk about here. And a lot of guys aren't that good too, right? Like this is kind of the range, Dunkel, where like in golf, I would say a good equivalent is like the 7K golfers that are chalky, right? Sometimes those guys are just like, okay, why are we playing Emiliano Grillo at chalk? Or some golfers just don't deserve to have 20% ownership. You know what I mean? And some of these drivers, they could be good fades, even though they have and provide good value at their price tag. There could be other options within that range. So we'll kick it off with Corey LaJoie at first. He's starting 24th. One of Coop's notes says, love LaJoie on the 1.5 mile tracks and continues to show speed. Then you got Justin Haley, who's second up there. He's starting 30th, so obviously has the ability to move up. AJ Allmendinger, he's another one that we got in there. Michael McDowell, he's another option starting in the 23rd spot. He's got Austin Cindric in there, who's at 15th, but he's only 6.5K, so not as much ability to move up, but still not bad for Austin Cindric. He's one of the better odds options at 100-1. Another 100-1 guy we got in here is Aric Almirola. He is definitely another option that I remember from playing a lot of NASCAR and COVID and everything. Almirola, not a bad driver, but obviously starting 18th, right? So you don't get as much of that ability. And Ty Dillon, one guy that I've definitely played a lot that has the ability to move up, but you never know what's going to happen with old Ty Dillon. It's always a wild ride. So, Doug, we'll talk about the value range. How are you handling it? Is this a good spot to eat chalk? Is this a good spot to make pivots? How are you kind of approaching this range?
Yeah, so I think you're going to see this is one of the tracks where you're going to have some of the lowest ownership on bottom feeder drivers. Now, granted, you're still going to, I'll talk on guys that are going to see ownership today from the bottom, but for the most part, it's a track where you can find yourself going laps down. You can find yourself in a heap of trouble in that regard. And it's just tough to make things up at a track like this. And if you don't have enough speed, it's just going to be a nightmare type track for some of these quote unquote value guys. Now I will talk on who I have on the value. So Noah Gragson will be probably the chalkiest of all the value guys. Okay. In terms of ownership, in terms of equity, you just look at a guy that's starting in 22nd. He's one of the few bottom feeder drivers that has win equity of less than 100-1. He's lacked speed, but decent yesterday in qualifying. I wouldn't say great by any means, but decent. And again, a track that you want somebody that's at least somewhat stabilized at the front to avoid going laps down in their own way. I think Gragson makes sense. So consider him good chalk for me. Guys like Corey LaJoie, right? He's starting a few spots back. He lacks win equity in every sense, but again, at least he's starting a little higher. I don't mind LaJoie. Definitely going to be much lower on him than Gragson, though. Justin Haley figures to be at least somewhat popular. I know I'm seeing lower ownership on him. I do expect him to be somewhat higher, though. Win equity, that's not terrible per se, based on who his counterparts. So I do like Haley. Eric Jones is a guy I like today as well. Aric Almirola is a guy I'm going to have too. Just because, again, I want guys that are kind of starting in that middle of the pack where, sure, in theory, they could go backwards, but they could also be favored heavily from attrition. And these are guys that are stable, right? Like these guys in the back, you just always worry about speed and how much luck you kind of need for them to do well. Now, Ty Dillon at 4,800, I get it. But man, this dude has absolutely no speed. I get it. 4,800, he's going to see attention, but not my cup of tea. And then the other cheap-ish guy I would say would be Ty Gibbs, but he's in the 7,800 range, so I don't even consider him super cheap. But the cheap guys I mentioned, just to be clear, are the only guys I have in my pool. The rest, so I'll just talk on some of the guys you mentioned and why I don't want them. So AJ Allmendinger, win equity's not there. hasn't shown a ton of speed in general. Starting from 27, it's not going to see much ownership anyway. To me, an easy fade. McDowell, he's just not great at 1.5 mile tracks. He has his bread and butter type of tracks. This just is not one of them. Austin Cindric, who's starting in 15th at 6,500, I think is way overpriced. For when you take everything into consideration at 6,500, you're more or less going to need him to T10. And if you look at his win equity odds, they just are not in line there at all. Now, sure, you could step in shit and it can happen. But if you're talking a guy that's going to be anywhere from 10 to 15% owned and a guy that more or less needs to at least probably T8, T10 for you to get there with a T5 win equity of like 13 or 14 to 1, that's just not something I'm looking to jump on. The same thing with Austin Dillon for me. Like two of them are the same driver and both easy fades for me. They can get there, but at their ownership percentage and at their projection equity, to me, these guys are projected, way too high for this slate. So those are easy fades. But yes, that kind of rounds out the value, I guess, in general, Mango. And if you have anything to add, we can, or we could just talk on some fades.
Yeah, no, we can talk about some fades. I think I definitely over the years have gotten more in the camp of like fades and DFS are like, especially on like, let's face it, NASCAR's kind of like Showdown, right? Like it's one event. You know what I mean? Same with Showdown. It's one event. And I feel like if you make a big fade sometimes, it's a huge deal and you can eat a lot more chalk, right? If you fade Kyle Larson last week, who's 50% owned, well, you already have one guy who's not in the optimal. It's like 50% of the field is dead. And by dead, I mean they can't win first place. Yes, you can min cash and stuff like that, but you can't win the event with Kyle Larson in that situation. So fades are important to me. I like to think about the ownership big time when it comes to some of these fades. I think it's a really good way to think about DFS and build really smart teams. For instance, if you went in Dunkel and went the optimal or optimizer, right, going to Saberson, and you saw, okay, here are the top three not most expensive. Here's the top three highest owned guys, and you X'd every single one and then like ran, put your rules in and ran the optimizer, you'd probably have some really unique teams, right? Just overall. So like fades are important to me. I love talking about it. So let's kind of dive in and talk about some of these fades here. Logano is on the fade list. Coop says he's struggling a little bit. Dover, he did have some problems. So I think I understand the Logano fade. He's kind of one of those middle tier drivers. The interesting one that Coop has in there is Ty Gibbs. We talked a little bit about, obviously a Toyota guy. That's a big stand to make. I know you talked earlier about fading someone like Will Byron at the top. So obviously you can't play every single guy, but making a fade is going to be key. But Ty Gibbs, one of those guys that Toyota that Coop has as a fade on the playbook. He's got Suarez in there, Ryan Blaney. I know Blaney's name. He's obviously been a pretty good driver overall. Austin Dillon, who was just mentioned in the chat, is listed as a fade. Maybe get your take on that because someone in the chat was talking about Austin Dillon. You got Harvick, Boucher. We got Chase Elliott in there. I mean, Chase Elliott is normally a pretty good driver. He's starting at 21st, where, hey, he's a good driver that has good placement differential, but the price is 9.8K, and that might lock you out of a pretty good dominator option. So talk about some of the fades here, Dunkel. What's your thoughts here?
So before I do that, there was a comment from Chris, LaJoy and Stenhouse to the tail. I'm not as concerned about Stenhouse, but I will say that does push LaJoy out of my player pool. I think that's a lot to add. I think if LaJoy gets there now, he needs attrition to get there. Don't get me wrong. He's shown speed on these 1.5 tracks, but the idea that he now has to make up, 14 places, it's not fun. Right. And God forbid now, because of that, he ends up going laps down. He needs to make up for a 24th place. He's priced as if he's in 24th. Yeah, LaJoy becomes a fade for me.
Is this an easy track to get lapped down, Dunkel? That's I think a good question to ask. Like I know.
You could definitely go laps down at this track. 1.5 mile track. These lap times are going to be, seemingly lap times should be. I would figure around the 33 to 35, 36 second range area. You're definitely going to go laps down here. So especially if you get a lot of runtime without cautions. Because if you get long green flag runs, people are going down laps for sure.
And then you don't get enough if you have long green flags, right? You don't get enough crashes to get yourself back up, right? As well.
Correct. Correct. You don't get the cautions to boost you back either. So it'll be an issue. So that's why LaJoy goes out of my pool now. I'll have to figure out who I'm going to swap him with because I do want another cheap guy. LaJoy opened up another cheap guy for me, which allowed me to go top heavy on certain builds. So I'll have to figure out who I want to merge in there as another driver to replace him because it is an ugly scene down at the bottom. I mentioned all the guys that I want to fade. So there's that whole angle to it. But In relation to some of the guys you mentioned, so I know Logano was mentioned as a fade. It's interesting, right? We talk on value and trying to extract value out of drivers. Logano is like dirt cheap for Logano. He's 8,400, and I know not his specialty. I know he offers no place differential, but man, this is it's the cheapest price he's been all year. And he's a tough guy to fade for me. Granted, it looks like he's going to see anywhere between 15 to 20% ownership. I know this track is not his bread and butter, but it's still a pricing game. And I think he's $600 more than Ty Gibbs. Like, are we joking? Like that to me, like when we talk about price drivers being underpriced, overpriced, like Ty Gibbs is in a good position for this track. He's a Toyota driver. He's likely going to have good speed throughout the race. But man, he's priced high for himself. Joey Logano is priced very low for himself. And if you look at his win equity, Logano's been steamed in a negative direction, which makes sense, right? Not his cup of tea. 22-1 to win this race. And he's $600 more than Ty Gibbs, who's 50-1 to win this race, 45-1 at some books. So yeah, to me, you're getting double better equity with Logano at a slightly cheaper tag. And Ty Gibbs is starting right behind him. It's like he has all this extra place differential. So yes, Logano's not a fade for me specifically. Going to have him in my pools. I'll probably be like slightly under if the field seriously is 20%, I'm definitely going to be slightly under that. But Logano's a tough fade at that price, just because you don't need as much from him at that price. So I do like Logano a bit. I mentioned Ty Gibbs, I'm going to have. Man, Suarez is tough. I do have him in pools. Definitely going to be underweight on him if he's going to be 20% owned. This is not his bread and butter type of track. He's priced about where you expect him to be, so it's not like you're getting that Logano type discount. I will have some Suarez, but I don't love it. He's also not racing very confidently these days. I mean, he's got one top 20 finish in his last 6 races. Is this the race he figures himself out? I don't know. I may end up fading him entirely, but if I play him, it's going to be very well owned. Ryan Blaney is a tough decision for me because of the pit crew, right? You need a strong pit at this track. He's priced about fair. He's got decent place differential. He's always got decent win equity. I don't know. It just feels like the type of track where his pit crew lets him down at some point. So he becomes tough for me to play. But again, he's also tough to fade. Austin Dillon, I already mentioned that's a fade. I'll have Harvick. Chris Buescher, I don't know, starting from 14th. I hate his win equity here. 7,300, I'd rather have other guys. So he's another fade. So I agree with Coop there. Eric Jones, I feel like you almost have to play. I know he hasn't raced well. I know he's been slow, but you have a good price here on a track where it's tough to find drivers that make sense for value. Chase Elliott, I feel like you kind of have to have some Chase out. Like, I feel like if you're very confidently throwing Josh Berry into your lineups, how are you not playing 9,800 Chase Elliott? Like, I don't know. You're looking for place differential, a guy with upside, a guy with win equity. I mean, Elliott's 16-1 to win this race. He's starting from 21st. So yeah, I do like Elliott. So definitely going to have him. And again, some of the other guys, I mentioned a bunch of fades as well. Graxon's kind of the chalky driver that I'm going to play from the back. Or at least from the low price end. The rest of it to me is all, Russian roulette. So I'm just going to try to avoid most of the rest. Chase Briscoe, one of the easiest fades in the slate for me. So yeah, he could get there, but you got to pick your spots, right? You can't just have your entire lineup of place differential guys. You got to pick your spots and stick with them. And Chase Briscoe's a fade for me.
All right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's good stuff there, Dunkel. Just to mention some of the stuff we got on this site. Also, if you could please like the video, that helped us out a ton over here at Run Pure Sports. But some of the stuff we got on the site, we got the playbook, which we've gone through the playbook for you today. We broke it all down. We kind of talked about some of the stuff Coop has. He also has breakdowns on everything, a little write-up in each section. If you want to check that out. Basically, when we talked about the fades, he's got a bunch of mentions of here, why he's fading them, why he likes them. Talks about why he likes the Dominators, how he's handling them. So be sure to check that out in the playbook. There's also a slate strategy at the bottom explaining the track too. So nice little stuff there. We also have core plays over here at Run Pure Sports, where you get a cash core, you get a single entry core, GPP core, and then Matty Ice throws in his core as well. So be sure to check out those core plays for NASCAR. And then we got the team drivers page, where it talks about all the drivers, different ones to like. If you're reading up on it, let's say, obviously we understand you probably listen to other podcasts too. Let's say people are talking about, it's a really good week for Ford. Well, go to the team drivers page. It's a really quick fix, finding a way to do that. I think it's good to build teams sometimes like that too. Hey, like maybe pair up some Ford drivers because the Fords are running hot. You never know. So definitely think that there's some good content over here at Run Pure Sports. Obviously, we have the live show. You don't need my NASCAR expertise, but Dunkel has done a great job of breaking it all down for you guys. And Dunkel does a phenomenal job at DFS too. He's done it in the college football streets. Was it number 6 or number 5 college football player in the world? I mean, I don't want to shorthand you, Dunkel, but actually, I haven't looked at the NASCAR ranking. How is Dunkel in the NASCAR streets?
Oh, I can't be. It's been a terrible NASCAR season for me, so I can't be. I mean, granted, sure, we could argue a few breaks here, a few breaks there. It's a totally different season for me, but man, I'll tell you what, this year. So we had the issue, was it 2 years ago or last year, where they started to use the new generation cars, and that brought its own level of variance. This year, the odd variance for me has been the end of race cautions. A lot of drivers are going super reckless late, and you kind of expect it to a certain extent. But man, there's been like 4 or 5 races in the last 2 months that have just had this streamline of end of race cautions that have just blown up all my lineup. It's just been, terrible. The restarts with the crashes at restarts have just been brutal for my bankroll. Hopefully that changes, and obviously it ebbs and flows, right? So hopefully we get a little more run pure in that sense. But yeah, not a great NASCAR season for me thus far, as far as my ROI profits in this sport. But that's the thing, right? It's a sport where someone like myself who goes very overweight with takes, and there's a lot of accidents. And if accidents impact your guys who are lower owned or whatnot, you're just going to be drawn dead. But I do know, that if I just stay on this course, I'm going to be way overweight on the right track, and I'll be in position to win it. And that's kind of what my goal is. So I'm okay to lose, a bunch of races in a row, knowing that I'll be super live for a race or two this year where I could top off a 25 or 100K finish.
Well, can we talk about this, Dunkel? As I rummage through the standings to find Dunkel's ranking, he's 90th. Not 90th. You're fine, but there's a nice little pleasant surprise, and you're going to love this. Guess who is the number 7 college football player in the world? That is one Uncle Dunkel. Guess who's number 6?
BigT.
He is. He's number 6, BigT. So, hey, there's something there with that. We could, I
can't wait. I can't wait till the start of the season to talk on the number 6th ranked college football player in the world, Anthony Niehaus. What a legend. What a legend.
Like we went the whole season talking you up as the number 6, number 5, and then BigT passes you. So, hey, we'll be able to do that. Zach, yeah, the rankings, they're on RG, Roto Grinders. They have like a rankings thing, and the ranking system's cool. I think it's a fun little concept, but also like, if I'm out there and I'm playing every single week and maybe have some wins, but I like lost $50,000 or something, I could still be like a top 10 person. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, it's really heavily based on volume, right? I mean, yes. It's really based on volume and your ability to accrue cashes off of the volume. So yeah,
but you can't go broke being up there, right? Like if you're up there, like you know what I mean? Like you won't be totally broke. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, no. I mean, if you're up there, you're at least finding your means to profit for sure. But yeah, I mean, I'll just answer your question on McDowell Yeezy. So he's just not a great 1.5 mile track driver. I do need to find another cheap driver though to add to my pool. It'll likely be just a dart. I'll be honest though, Yeezy, I don't think that dart for me is going to be McDowell. I guess I somehow could be convinced into it. It's just, if he was starting further back at this price, I'd definitely be more interested. I don't like his speed at these tracks. It just things seem to go wrong for him here at these types of 1.5 miles as well. I would have preferred LaJoie, as you guys know. I mentioned him earlier, cheaper price, starting one position back. But now that he's all the way in the back, it does cloud things. But it does push all these other drivers up a spot, which is a benefit to a guy like a Ty Dillon at 4,800. But again, I'll try to find a happy medium. And who knows? Look, maybe that gets me back to Chase Briscoe. But at that point, I'm replacing a 5K driver or a 6K driver with a 7,500 driver, and I don't like that either. So it might be Gilliland for me, but either way, time will tell. But I also don't like those super back drivers because of the potential for them to go laps down. But that's kind of where my head's at. I know it sounds a little scattered, but I promise you my head's a little scattered right now on who I'm replacing that driver with. So it's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, well, I'm building my teams now. I played some Gillian, I think, last week. I'm going to play him again. I looked at Jason's little cheat sheet that he has. He has a nice little breakdown over here at Run Pure Sports. It is free, so just like this show, you can come watch that for free. You can check out this for free. The Coop thing. What?
Also, real quick, 57 likes is hurtful. It's hurtful. Mangone comes on the show. He's supposed to mow his lawn. He takes time away from that to jump on the show. I'm giving away countless fruitful, LOL, information. 57 likes is hurtful. It hurts my soul. I'm probably not going to sleep tonight because of it. So hopefully we can get those likes to 100 before the end of the show. Just feel free to like the button. There's 200 of you watching. I'm pretty sure a few of you can take that index finger out of your ass and like the video for a few of us at Run Pure.
Yeah, it doesn't seem too hard. I was supposed to take the dog out to play fetch. The dog is waiting downstairs now. So there's a lot of activities that I have to get done, along with getting some NBA content up too, because we got NBA winners coming. We got a jam-packed day over here at Run Pure Sports. And look at this. Uncle T is here to hit the like for us. You really do love to see Uncle T popping in here, but be sure to also check out Jason's free article. Like I said, I'll be using that to help myself build, using Coop's playbook and all the content over here at Run Pure Sports. I'm definitely diving in and looking at the cheat sheet in a few. Dunkel, anything else to tell the people kind of before we get on out of here?
No, I do hope that we finally have a race that I'm actually, entered into a decent amount of lineups with, that doesn't become a caution nightmare at the end. I'm hopeful, because the caution nightmares have not played into my lineups yet this year. I'm hoping maybe one time a caution nightmare will. And as I look back last year, like some of the races that I cashed on, I had, I think, 4 or 5 25K hits, and then I had the 100K hit. All those races, they didn't have a disaster amount of cautions. So yeah, you hope to get some of that edge in your favor. And in theory, you kind of hope that attrition kind of bounces both ways. It hasn't bounced my way yet this year, but I'm hoping, one of these tracks like this one, maybe it does. Time will tell. But we shall see. So either way, positive thoughts, staying optimistic, and hopefully I'm kind of live in some of these races, and hopefully you guys use some of this data as well, and maybe one of these races you guys are live also. Cindric today is an easy fade for me, Steven, at his price, at his win equity. Is an easy fade for me specifically. He's going to see ownership. He's going to see like 10 to 12% ownership, I think. But no, will not be in my lineups at all. So good luck, God bless with him. But other than that, man, I'm good on my end. I feel like we covered a lot of it.
Yeah, I'm not good yet though. You know why? I did make a huge mistake. I forgot to mention Big T's NASCAR player pool. My apologies to the Big T, the number 6 college football player in the world, Big T. I don't know if you just tuned in, but Dunkel's number 7 and you're number 6 now. So hey, newsflash, Big T, you are the big dog in the college football streets over here at Run Pure now, not Dunkel anymore. So hate to see it. But yes, Big T has a player pool. Let me go check out and see if the player pool is up. And by
the way, I love this. And Big T, I'm glad you're listening, because I see this in the Saber Sim. I love this. I don't know if you noticed this, Mangone, but now inside a Saber Sim for Run Pure, Big T's core has its own column, and you can it green stars them when they're in the core. I love that.
Yeah, we definitely will do that for a while, but it's tough to be able to do when building lineups. So you have to have the time, and NASCAR, it's easier, right, with the time. It's tough with some of the other sports, but hopefully we can get in a nice groove doing that with the old MLB. But yeah, it's a nice little feature that we have over here at Run Pure Sports with Saber Sim using an optimizer. So you definitely want to be using that when building your teams. I'll say this: I used Saber Sim yesterday, and yeah, I had some good NBA Showdown teams last night. It's good for these Showdown contests. We'll have some big Showdown player prize pools in NBA, so you'll want to be building teams for that. So yeah. King of Smack, we talked about Keselowski and Stenhouse for sure. I know Dunkel liked Keselowski a little bit, but hey, be sure to go on Rewind to check that out. We got tons of good stuff here. Hit that like while getting out the door, and check out Big T's player pool. His core is up. He's got the guys that he's over 50% on, the 30 to 50%, the 5 to 30%. He's got it all. He's got key optimizer rules. He has it all broken down for you over here at Run Pure Sports, so be sure to check that out. But for me, Mangone, and Uncle Dunkel, we'll see you guys later.